Welcome in. You've got Show and BK. I'm BK. Show not here because he forgot he has a family. And apparently, as a family, sometimes you do things together. And so tonight, he's going to go do some stuff with his family, even though I don't, Serda, maybe I'm missing this. Did we change the time and the day that we record this? Is this something new that we're doing here?
So what it really is he's in Kansas City right now. And all week I was like, hey man, I know you're in Kansas City. Like you probably want to spend time with family and see people and stuff. So if we need to change the schedule up or you need to, miss some things, it's fine. We'll figure it out. And then we decided to go ahead and like kick the last two nightly fixes this week. And then he said he was still good for this. And then today he was like, actually, I can't do it. I got stuff. But
it was
all we thought about was
it's
fine. It's fine. Just tell me what you need from us.
We had locked it in. We're like, all right, we're good to go all week long. We're kind of figuring out what time works for everybody. And then this morning, he's like, hey, I'm actually completely unavailable. I've got a bunch of stuff going on. All good. I might have to miss next week episode. So I'm a total like straw man here. Glass houses, all of those different kinds of things. But we are here to talk about the Chiefs. Chiefs are in training camp, working towards their first preseason football game. We are getting closer and closer to seeing them kind of take the field for something meaningful. Let's talk a little bit about the offensive line, Serda. That seems to be the biggest storyline at Chiefs camp thus far. The number one question I would say going into camp is Josh Simmons going to be this team's starting left tackle? Tell me if you disagree with this. I think asked and answered for the most part. Like, barring something unforeseen, Josh Simmons is the starting left tackle on opening night, right?
Yeah. He's taken every rep with the first teams basically since camp opened. Like, it feels like it's safe to say he is just the locked in starter, unless, I don't know, maybe that first preseason game next week, like maybe just gets totally trounced when he gets out there in a live game. But I'm assuming he's good to go as their week one starter.
In that scenario, you have two spots for three players. You have Kingsley Suamataia, who's been getting most of the reps so far at left guard. Jawan Taylor, when healthy, has seemingly been getting most of the reps at right tackle, but he is missing practice again. And it's unknown at this point if that's just a rest thing, if he's actually dealing with that knee issue once again. And then there's Jalen Moore, who can play either of those two positions, depending on what they want to do early in this season. Serda, I wanted to ask you this because I have my own thoughts on the matter, but I am curious where you land on this. As a fan, what is your best case scenario on how those two spots end up looking on opening night? Are you rooting for two players over a third to be in those two spots right now?
I'm just rooting for the offensive line to be good. Like, I don't really care who gets the starting job, but I think if you were to ask Andy Reid and he were to give you like a brutally honest answer, which he would never do, like, I think the coaching staff would hope that it's Kingsley at left guard, and then right tackle, probably Jawan Taylor, and Jalen Moore is your reserve guy who can switch back and forth and play multiple positions along the line. And then, maybe they are really seeing something in camp where it's like, maybe they like Jalen Moore than Jawan Taylor. And that's fine, too, if Jalen Moore winds up being your starting right tackle and Josh Simmons is your cornerstone left tackle. But I think the biggest question is, like, then is Kingsley, like, legitimate at guard because of all the potential that he supposedly had last year and then just got totally dismantled during his rookie season.
It's a good point. I honestly, that's something I hadn't considered too much. What if you get into opening night, you feel pretty good about Kingsley, he's your starting left guard, and then suddenly things go awry in the first couple of weeks of the season, and now you're having to bump somebody out. And if you had gone with Jalen Moore at right tackle, now you're moving him to left guard, putting Jawan Taylor back in at right tackle, so you have multiple positions that are affected in such a move. It is a fair point. In an ideal world, Josh Simmons at left tackle, Kingsley Suamataia is left guard, Creed is center, Trey Smith is right guard. And in my opinion, I don't view them this way. I don't think Jalen Moore is a better player than Jawan Taylor. But if you were asking me in an ideal world, what ends up happening? He beats out Jawan Taylor this year in camp. And the reason why is because of what it does not only for 2025, but also for 2026. Serda, I don't know if you've looked at the cap implications, but they can't have Jawan Taylor on this team on his current contracts next year. There's no chance. He accounts for, against the cap right now, $27 million. If you were to cut him, you would save $20 million against the cap. So you either have to extend him next year, which feels unlikely as an age 29 player. We've seen what Brett Veach does. He, generally speaking, doesn't sign most guys into their early 30s. Or more likely, you're going to have to cut him going into next year. So if you already have your internal answer for that position, and not only has he started games, but looks good for you at the right tackle position, I think in an ideal world, they have their answer at left guard with Kingsley for this year and beyond, and they have their right tackle for this year and hopefully beyond in Jalen Moore as well. I don't know how likely that is, but I think in an ideal world, that's probably what it ends up looking like.
Well, and for everything that was made about like Jalen Moore's money and then them taking Josh Simmons and like, how could the Chiefs give him that much money to be a backup tackle? Like, comparatively, if he winds up being your starting right tackle at any point this season and then is the guy next season, he's affordable. Like, he's a deal at what starting right tackles go for in the NFL right now compared to what Jawan Taylor's going to get. And, and I still think Jawan Taylor's like, yeah, he's got his problems. He's certainly not a perfect tackle, but he's not as awful as a lot of Chiefs fans would make him out to be. But he's certainly not elite or anything like that. He's not Mitch Schwartz. Like he's nothing close to that level of good. But I do think that like they're really hoping that Jalen Moore is the real deal, and and the spot starts that he got for Trent Williams last season, like they can capitalize on that. And this is how you stay good when you're paying Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey this much money. You have a rookie left tackle, you have a rookie left guard, you move on from Joe Thuney, and then you've got an affordable option in Jalen Moore at right tackle. And then if he's awesome, you can maybe look at extending him down the line. And then maybe you draft a couple of more guys, develop a couple more guys in the pipeline behind them, and you still have offensive line depth. Like, I think as long as Josh Simmons pans out and like what we've seen the Chiefs do with the guard position in general, like Kingsley should be functional. I think like he should be a functional guard. He's not going to be Joe Thuney, but if he's fine, then your offensive line is really set up very nicely for the next several years.
And this is where, like, I've already seen some of this kind of bubbling underneath the surface, especially on social media. If you go into opening night, and it's like the chalk answer for what the opening night offensive line will be is probably Simmons, Suamataia, Humphrey, Smith, Taylor. I think that's the most likely starting five on opening night, which means Jalen Moore just becomes one of the most expensive swing tackles in the entire NFL. And I've already seen it starting, Serda, where people are saying something to the effect of, why they even sign him if this was the plan all along, was for Jalen Moore to come in and have the same role that he had with the San Francisco 49ers, which is a swing tackle. But instead of making, pennies on the dollar for it, now he's making, 10, 15, $20 million over the next 2 years to do that for the Chiefs. I mean, the honest to God answer is they didn't know that this was going to fall into their laps the way that it did. I don't think they anticipated, and they couldn't expect Josh Simmons to be there in the late 30s the way that last year they sat there and said, okay, Kingsley is going to be our guy after getting him in the second round. I think they saw the pitfalls of that from a year ago where they had no fallback option. There were no alternatives in place where, hey, if Kingsley fails, we're screwed. Like that's our guy. It's him or Wanye, and I guess we'll sign DJ Humphries. Hopefully he's going to be all right by mid-season, and we'll just make that work for us. They saw what that can look like, and so they said, all right, in a worst-case scenario, Jalen Moore is a 6 out of 10 as our left tackle. That's a hell of a lot better than the 2 out of 10 that we had a year ago that we ended up going to the Super Bowl with, but eventually, we fell on our face in part because of that issue that we had on our O-line. The Chiefs have done this a couple of times where they see an issue on the offensive line, once after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, and then this year after the Super Bowl against the Eagles, and they say never again. And they go into the offseason and they don't just prioritize the O-line, they prioritize O-line depth. And that's where Jalen Moore comes in. So if you end up having him as a super expensive swing tackle, it's not what you wanted. But for this team, it's a hell of a lot better than what the alternative was a year ago. And I'd rather have that guy that can play, 4 of your positions on the O-line. So I feel good about my 6th offensive lineman as opposed to last year where I didn't feel good about it at all.
And you can afford the luxury of a pricey swing tackle right now because, like, for everything that's made about, like, Mahomes' deal and, like, how much money he's making, like, then Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, like, on the defensive side of the ball, like, outside of Chris Jones, you got a lot of team-friendly contracts. I know McDuffie's coming up, but then on the offensive side of the ball, you're not paying anyone big money on the offensive side of the ball right now because these are all young players that you've drafted or cost-effective veterans in like Juju and Hollywood Brown, and then Travis Kelce just constantly taking team-friendly deals because he doesn't want to play anywhere else other than Kansas City. So like you can afford a little extra cash for offensive line depth, and I think that's a lot more important than anybody else ever thought it would be after last season.
That's the benefit of the 2022 draft. That's what it does for you. When you hit on a draft class the way that the Chiefs did with McDuffie and Karlaftis and Brian Cook and Leo Chanel and Jalen Watson and Isaiah Pacheco, and you get like 5 or 6 starters out of that group, when you're 2, 3, 4 years in and all of those guys are still starting for you on their cost-controlled, cheap deals, even when like George Karlaftis signs his extension, it doesn't really affect this year in any way on the cap. You have the ability to then go out there and make some of those moves that are luxury moves. And it could end up where, hey, this guy's probably in a best case scenario, not going to take a snap for us, but it's worth it for us in the event that he does end up needing to take some snaps for us. All right. So the biggest storyline at camp remains Josh Simmons. Serda, for you, outside of that, what has been the storyline that has most caught your attention thus far in camp?
Matt Ariza already locking up the starting punter job. I think it's, the pads come on this week. We're feeling good about the wide receiver room, but we've got this thing looming with Rashee Rice that everybody's just like, hell, just get this over with. Like, just get him suspended so we're dealing with week 1. And we don't know if that's going to happen because the NFL doesn't operate on convenient timetables all of the time. So we're not really sure when that's actually going to come down. But now that Hollywood Brown's a little bit banged up and, they're hopeful it's not that big of a deal, Xavier Worthy's in the concussion protocol, which, obviously doesn't seem like it's that serious of a concussion. Like they thought he could have gone back out on the practice field and then maybe he showed symptoms later on that like put him into the protocol or whatever. And so like you hope, he's back within a week or 2 or something like that. And he's totally fine. And then hopefully this isn't a serious thing with Hollywood Brown, but like all of a sudden, like if we get to week 1, Hollywood Brown's already banged up, which has been the problem with him. And then you're down to like Worthy and Juju and Jalen Royals. Sky Moore's hurt now, by the way. Don't know if he was even going to be a viable like roster spot guy this season, but he's still in that room. And then Tyquan Thornton's really just like showing a lot at training camp. And all the coaches have talked about him like he's prototypical Andy Reid wide receiver, just small, fast field stretcher. You can give him some end arounds. You can do some things with him, like moving around the formation and stuff like that. And I think Tyquan Thornton, like he's just been on some really bad teams with the New England Patriots. And I'm not saying he's like a game-changing player with unlocked potential, but I think he's a serviceable NFL wide receiver who is going to wind up making this roster and then could wind up actually having a bigger role than anybody actually anticipated, especially if they don't have Rashee Rice in week 1. Because it would be amazing if Jalen Royals pans out and looks like he's awesome. But also, like at the same time, I'm not falling down this trap of believing that Andy Reid week 1 is going to trot a rookie wide receiver out there in place of Rashee Rice. And he's going to play like 85% of the offensive snaps. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen. So Tyquan Thornton could wind up actually having like a more significant offensive role than any of us actually believed when training camp started.
What do you think that means? Like, if he does end up having a quote unquote more significant role than we were expecting, like, are you saying, he plays a few snaps a game? You think he ends up being a guy that like has a real, hey, he's on the field, 20 to 30% of the snaps. And
Yeah.
even when they're healthy, he could be a guy that can continue to be a deep threat for him. What are you anticipating that looking like?
I think it's like that. I think it's like 30% of the snaps type of guy, but then he comes in and maybe gets a manufactured touch here and there, like the McCole Hardman role. Like, just come in, give him an end around and try to get him out into space and try to utilize his speed, or plug him in to go deep, and Mahomes takes one deep shot a game to him or something, and see if you can connect on something like that. Like, I just feel like there's things that Andy Reid is going to scheme up for Tyquan Thornton. So like, even when he does get snaps, if it's not a lot, he's going to be in there for a purpose.
I think people forget the pedigree that this guy has. He was a top 50 pick, man. He was selected before George Pickens, Alec Pierce, Sky Moore, different positions, but he was selected a little bit before Trey McBride as well. I mean, that class had some really good receivers that he went in front of. Once upon a time, people really believed in Tyquan Thornton's ability, and then he went to the worst situation possible. I mean, the Patriots were an absolute disaster in every possible way. First, they had no quarterbacks. Then they have no offensive line. The system was no good. They completely overhauled everything this past offseason because of all of that. I really wonder if he could end up becoming somebody in the Chiefs offense that can contribute. It's just such a deep receiver room, man, with guys that they really believe in. So if he's going to have that chance, like Nico Remigio, I think he's going to make this roster. Juju's making this roster. Jalen Royals is making this roster. Worthy and Brown are both making this roster on opening night. Rasheed obviously not. It gets tough numbers wise to be able to see where he fits into this thing. But now is the time where he's got to make his presence felt. That first preseason game, especially if they're still a little banged up and they decide, you know what, there's no real reason to get some of these guys that are hurt, not injured, but hurt out there. He needs to have a big game. Preseason doesn't matter a lot for most guys. I think preseason really matters for Tyquan Thornton and his ability to make the roster. And then if he does, potentially have that role that you're talking about. For me, the guy that I have been enamored with, and there's been some buzz that is starting to build around him, is Omar Norman-Lott. In the draft, he was probably the draft pick that I was most confused by, just because I didn't know what the Chiefs had acquired in him, right? They used this valuable selection in the second round on a defensive tackle, which we all said, yeah, that's clearly a need. They have no depth behind Chris Jones. You've got to get somebody in there, especially after this offseason, losing somebody that was so valuable for you a year ago. But Omar Norman-Lott was somebody that was in this huge rotation at Tennessee. His numbers really weren't all that impressive. He wasn't somebody that played against the run a whole lot. So it was just difficult to see, all right, how's this going to work in a Steve Spagnuolo system? And then you see some of the buzz, especially coming from people that don't normally just like talk out of their, with Nate Taylor going out there and saying like, hey, he looks the part and he's getting legit number one reps on a defense where you don't see that from Steve Spagnuolo. Like, think about the cornerback situation right now. Noel Williams is not getting the reps with the ones. Instead of him getting the reps with the ones right now, you're seeing, while Kristin Fulton is out, a guy they trust in Shamari Connor getting those reps. At defensive tackle, it's Omar Norman-Lott that's going in there, especially on passing downs alongside Chris Jones. I find that to be fascinating, Serda. So one of the storylines that I am most interested in seeing, how does this look when they actually take the field for preseason, is Omar Norman-Lott, their second-round rookie from Tennessee.
If he manages, like, at any point this season, but especially like early in the season, to carve out like a significant role for himself, and there's going to be a rotation along the defensive line. Like, Chris Jones gets rotated out. Like, Steve Spagnuolo likes rotating bodies in and giving you different looks along the defensive line and moving those guys all over the place. But like, if he gives them legitimate pass rush presence from the interior on top of Chris Jones just being Chris Jones, being the most double team defender in all of the NFL. Like, what are teams going to do? And then, George got his payday. Are we still going to see George take another job? Charles Omenihu, like, finally being healthy for a full year and looking to see if he can cash in again this offseason. And then Mike Dana is just like always like Mr. Consistency. Like, exactly what you're going to get out of him as a player. Like,
and it sounds like Gelati's getting some run with the ones lately too.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of juice too. Like, he could wind up having a rotational role on this defensive line. But like, if Omar Norman Lott is really like what they're advertising him to be, it could be like it could dramatically increase my expectations for the defensive line overall. Like, if he can consistently like be that other guy on the other side of Chris Jones that basically makes it impossible for teams to just be like, hey, we're just going to clog up Jones and everybody else we can slow down enough to get a playoff or something like that.
And you think about where they were a year ago, like this pass rush was a problem, man. We talked about it a lot during the regular season. They had 20 fewer sacks than they did in the 2023 season. Tershawn Wharton is a massive loss for them, even in that department. 6.5 sacks last year. That was second on the team. Chris Jones quietly only had 5 sacks last year. Still an absolute menace at all times, but only 5 sacks on the season. So if you're going to improve in the pass rush department, like you almost need, maybe not all the way there, but you almost need something resembling what Tershawn Wharton did for you a year ago from Omar Norman Lott. And then the real improvement comes from the edge rushers, right? But if you don't get that from Omar Norman Lott, now it's the edge rushers that have to make up for Tershawn Wharton, and you have to take another step there from Karlaftis or some of the depth guys there at the edge rush position. But man, it all becomes so much easier to see, okay, this is how it works. This is how it fits together. This is how they get the production. If you got it right, and Omar Norman Lott comes in immediately and he's able to replace, 70% of what you got out of Tershawn Wharton a year ago.
Yeah. And Tershawn Wharton was a great story, like undrafted player, career year, goes and gets his payday. But like, he didn't have like Omar Norman Lott, like a lot of like the pre-draft buzz on him too was like, he's got a lot of juice from the interior and like he's got like a high success rate as a pass rusher, but he was this constant like rotational player. But it was also like kind of more of like a system thing. So it's like, can he actually like carve out a full-time role? And it's like, if the Chiefs really went out here and identified that and found another guy who can legitimately be an interior problem like that, who's got high-end athleticism and pass rush ability like that, like that would be incredible. Because I've been sitting here for the last couple of years just being like, you got to think about what's next after Chris Jones. Like, you got to think about what's next after Chris Jones. He's going to slow down eventually. And like, the Rams did an incredible job of planning for life after Aaron Donald. They rebuilt their entire defensive line in 2 seasons, and now they've got one of the best young defensive lines in the NFL. Like, if he winds up being like a smash for them in the second round, like I think it totally changes the overall potential of the Chiefs defensive line this season.
I would also add this. I think the Chiefs are starting to earn the benefit of the doubt with what they do with their defensive draft selections. I mean, you go back now, 2019, their selections on the defensive side of the ball. Juan Thornhill, who, for all of the faults, was a good football player for the Chiefs, and if not for an injury, could have been a really good player here. Colin Saunders was a great selection in the 3rd round. Rashad Fenton, for, again, all of his faults, that's a hell of a 6th-round draft pick, dude. A lot of those guys don't even make the roster, and he ended up becoming a consistent member of the defense. In 2020, you get Willie Gay, who was fine, but then L'Jarius Sneed and Mike Dana. Nick Bolton and Kando in 2021 are a little bit of a miss, but you bet on upside with Kando in the 4th round. That happens. McDuffie, Karlaftis, Cook, Chenal, Joshua Williams, and Jalen Watson all in the 2022 draft. All hit. 2023, you whiffed with the Felix Anudike-Uzomah pick, it appears. And Shamari Connor in the 4th round is a really good selection. Last year, you come back, and you end up with Kamal Hayden. Okay, missed. But Jaden Hicks, who appears to be a huge, huge win in the 4th round as well. If they got it right with Lott, and it sounds like they might have gotten it right with Gelati as well, who's rotating already over Felix Anudike-Uzama. Dude, I'm just starting to give the benefit of the doubt to this front office whenever it comes to what they prioritize on the defensive side of the ball when they get into these drafts, even if it is maybe a little bit more of a, unpopular pick as Omar Norman Lott was this year.
Yeah. I don't see how you can argue against it. Like, even if most NFL draft classes, if you get like 2 key contributors out of a draft class, you're like, okay, solid draft class. Maybe one other guy develops and eventually gets some snaps and some playing time. And then you're like, okay, solid draft class. And the Chiefs have just done this multiple years in a row now where they just find guys. They just find guys that wind up being contributors and wind up making an impact on the roster. It's really difficult to do that year over year.
They're doing it at like a 75 to 80% clip. I mean, that's insane, dude. If you hit on, especially once you get beyond the 3rd round, if you're at like 25%, 1 out of every 4 guys becomes a contributor, not even a big time stud. You're doing a pretty damn good job. Like they are on such a heater right now. It's not to the same degree. The Saints had a couple of drafts in a row. This was probably like 8 or 9 years ago now that just like built that team that went to NFC championship games year after year. The Detroit Lions had a couple of drafts in a row where their heater was ridiculous, and it's built what is now the core of their roster. Chiefs aren't quite to that degree right now, but damn, it's pretty close, man.
Yeah.
They've done a hell of a job at constructing this roster and continuing to find that cheap, cost-controlled talent in the draft.
And maybe they still have something in Ron's guy, Jared Wiley, that we haven't seen yet.
Have you heard buzz about him?
No, but I'm giving him a little bit of a pass because he worked his way back from an ACL injury pretty quick. Man. And so it's like, maybe he's not all the way there, but the fact that he didn't start training camp on the pup is like encouraging for a young player.
All right, speaking of the pup, are we going to see Kristin Fulton play for the Chiefs, man? Like, I wouldn't say I'm worried. I'm not really worried. I mentioned this last time until like we get to that Seattle game and he's still not on the field for the Chiefs. All right, I might start getting a little worried. But Steve Spagnuolo came out, I believe it was today, and was like, yeah, listen, it's a tough defense to learn. There's a lot of different sub packages that we put in. We do things differently than other teams, and it's going to be a lot for Fulton to just kind of come in and hit the ground running. Serda, for me, my concern is twofold. One, him being ready to go for the first week of the season because they have some tough games early on. The Chargers, Philly, Baltimore, that's 3 of your first 4 games. That's not going to be an easy stretch. And 2, dude, they keep doing this thing where Shamari Connor is the answer in the slot, and I just frankly don't want to see that again. So how are you feeling right now about the situation with Kristin Fulton?
I mean, I'm hopeful that he's going to be there week 1. Like, it's just, according to them, it was just like a cleanup procedure on his knee, which, again, you read said that this week, and that was really the first thing they had even really said about it. They were just like, he's starting the camp on PUP, and like didn't really give us anything other than dealing with a knee. And then Andy Reid said it was like a cleanup procedure. And so, hopefully it's nothing serious. Like, players get those all the time and are seemingly fine. It just takes a little bit of time, especially if there's like swelling or something in the knee. But yeah, like, I mean, Kristin Fulton's a veteran, so I would think he could pick up the defense fast, but you want them to be able to gel because Steve Spagnuolo's defense is so dependent on communication and knowing your role and knowing your rotation and your assignment, what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what's really important. Like, you can't learn all of that just by sitting down and like memorizing the playbook. Like, you need to be out there doing it with the other guys in the secondary. And that's what I'm concerned about. Najee Johnson's still getting a lot of run too. Joshua Williams seemingly is not making this team. So Steve Spagnuolo just hates him. I feel like they could. And there's some people like speculating about the Chiefs flipping Joshua Williams for like a late round pick. I think you should totally do that.
Remember when the Chiefs did the same thing, but in reverse? That's how they got Charvarius Ward back in the day.
Yeah.
Is they ended up flipping like a 5th or a 6th round pick to the Cowboys, I think it was at the time, who just had a bunch of defensive back surplus. So yeah, I think something similar could absolutely happen there.
But the Shamari Connor thing, like, we just talk about it every week. I think he's a serviceable player. I think there's a role for him on the defense. Like I think he can do some things, but covering what traditionally are like the twitchiest, fastest wide receivers out of the slot, who are the best route runners, like that's just not his thing. Like he just doesn't have the short area quickness. He does not have the ability to cover those types of players, and we saw it over and over again last season. So I just can't assume that that's what the plan really is, but apparently that is, because that's all we've been seeing at training camp.
I mean, on the plus side, all you see early on, again, are the Chargers, Eagles, Ravens, and you can throw the Giants in there, whatever. But in the event that Fulton's not back to 100% early on, man, that week 1 matchup against Ladd McConkey is going to hit different. I just, they can't possibly go into week 1 with the anticipation of, hey, Shamari Connor is going to be lined up on Ladd McConkey 70% of the time, and we're just going to live with the results of that. And then the next week, hey, Devontae Smith is going to be lined up against Shamari Connor 70% of the time, and we're just going to be totally cool with that. You can't possibly go into it with that as your plan. I have too much faith in Steve Spagnuolo for me to believe that they're going to do that, but man, I just get back onto the field, man. We need you to get back out there, Kristin Fulton. Next week, can we start seeing, just incorporate it even into some individual drills? Start doing some football activities. If you can do that, I'll start to feel a lot better about this.
Hopefully Trent McDuffie just follows Ladd McConkey week 1.
They have like no other weapons. So
I mean, Quentin Johnson, we're not so worried about. Maybe Trey Harris, the other rookie wide receiver they drafted this year. Like, I know he's been making some noise at camp, but like, I feel like you could manage those guys. Like, you just need Ladd McConkey to not go for 150 and 2 touchdowns in week 1.
All right, final thing that I wanted to get to here this week, show in BK. So we got some news today. This is NFL related news, but my guess is you'll start to see this kind of trickle into Chiefs Twitter in the coming days. Terry McLaurin, a fan favorite among Chiefs fans, has requested a trade because the Washington Commanders are acting ridiculous, honestly, in this whole situation, and have decided, you know what, we're not totally sure if we're going to extend you or give you the money that you're looking for. So McLaurin said, you know what, forget this. You're clearly not going to give me the money that I'm worth. I'm requesting a trade from Washington. Serda, I don't think there's any scenario in which the Chiefs could make this happen. Their cap situation is just too tight in future seasons. They have too many other guys that they have decided to pay, and too many other guys that they still have to pay. Like McDuffie, let me actually put this a different way. If the Chiefs plan to re-sign Trent McDuffie, I don't think you can trade for Terry McLaurin, because he is very likely to get similar money to Trent McDuffie. But if the Chiefs don't plan to re-sign Trent McDuffie, I think they do, this is exactly the kind of move that would be of interest if you think that wide receiver is a long-term question for this team still. So, Serda, when you saw that Commanders receiver Terry McLaurin is frustrated with his negotiation, he has requested a trade, the Commanders insist they're not trading him, did you have any thoughts about the possibility of him being on the Chiefs?
No, because I don't think it would happen. But would it be fun? Yes. Like, I think Terry is, and I think when he wanted a contract extension like a couple years ago, there was a lot of people that were like, Chiefs should go trade for Terry McLaurin. They should go get Terry McLaurin right now, because Terry is an awesome wide receiver who has unfortunately been handcuffed by just awful quarterback play and like awful ownership his entire time in the NFL until last season. Now he's got this star young quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and the Commanders, new ownership, like seemingly investing in the team and the culture and like changing things there. And like, finally they're set up to win for the first time in his career. While after he was the one that had to be there for all of those garbage years and all those years where he could have been doing more, and probably if he was playing with a better team anywhere else in the league, would have been like an all-pro caliber wide receiver, but quietly he just kept putting up 1,000 yards, like, because he's just an awesome player. He's a great deep ball winner. Like, He can go up and get the football. Like he's a good route runner. Like he's an awesome wide receiver. The problem with him being is that like he's like 29 years old, and that's what the Commanders are saying, like why they don't want to give him more money, which is ridiculous because they have the money to just do it and pay him. And it's not even like he's like, I want to reset the market on like another 5-year extension or something. And it's like, just rework his deal and give him like a 3-year extension where you can void it after 2 years. And he'd probably be totally fine with that. But the Commanders are trying to win right now. Like they accidentally made an NFC championship game last year. No one believed the Commanders were just going to make an NFC championship game last season. And so they go all in. They make all these moves to basically go all in for the season. And now this is hanging over their heads. And so it feels like if they were to even consider for a second to trade a player like this to the Kansas City Chiefs, it's not going to be for draft picks next year. It's going to be for somebody the Chiefs have on the roster right now, like Rashee Rice, like Xavier Worthy, like, or another pass rusher, like, hey, you guys, Chris Jones is getting old. What would you guys give us Chris Jones? Like, it's going to be something stupid like that, where if you're a Chiefs fan, you would be like, no, hang up the phone. Why would you do that? And that's where I would fall on it every time too, because Terry's a great player. He would be super exciting to see in the Chiefs offense. I would much rather have Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy in their cost-effective years in youth over what Terry's bringing to the table just right now.
I think this is a reminder of the opportunity cost when you re-sign guys like Trey Smith, and when you extend George Karlaftis, you extend Nick Bolton, you're probably going to extend Trent McDuffie. As of now, he's going to be on that 5th-year option for next season at a minimum, and that's 13-14 million bucks against the cap. Those are all good players to have around. I'm not saying on any of those scenarios I would have done it something different. I wouldn't have. I would have brought all of those guys back as well. But when you have, Trey Smith is going to be $25 million against the cap next year. Creed Humphrey, $18 million against the cap next year. Trent McDuffie, $13 million against the cap next year. Nick Bolton, $19 million against the cap next year. This stuff starts to add up, man. And these are all homegrown players, and you have to make choices accordingly. And the choice is we have less flexibility whenever we start paying these guys that we were able to draft and develop internally. And one of those choices is we can no longer have the flexibility to go make a move like this. We can't pay top of the market to the wide receiver position. In fact, I think that was like one of the biggest things that the Chiefs have done in the last 5 years is they made a choice. They made a choice of Tyreek Hill or opportunity to spend elsewhere. And the Chiefs made that choice. They said, we think we are a better team overall, 1-53. If we reallocate this money and get draft picks in return for Tyreek Hill, so far it's worked out. I mean, it's hard to say that they've been wrong about this, but you don't then go back to the market a few years later and say, all right, now we'll go give more money than what we were otherwise planning to be giving to Tyreek Hill to Terry McLaurin. I don't think that's a move that makes a whole lot of sense for this team. I love Terry. 5 years ago, I think it would have been a fantastic move for the Chiefs. Right now, I just don't think it makes sense for where they're at.
And honestly, if they did it and the price was like Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy, I would be angry. Like, I would be mad because we spent for years after Tyreek Hill, got to go get wide receivers, And now you finally hit on 2 of them after years of trying to fill bodies in that room. And now you've got 2 guys who could legitimately be the core future of this offense for the next several years. And if you would move one of them for a 29-year-old wide receiver that's going to want to be paid like he's one of the 5 highest paid wide receivers in football, that's not a good business decision.
Yeah, it also is just one of those things like, I can't imagine a scenario in which this is a Brett Veach move. At this point, we have a pretty good idea on the kinds of players that he's looking to acquire, the age range that he looks to acquire them, and kind of how he goes about his business, right? A 29-year-old wide receiver about to get paid $30 million that you're going to have to trade assets to acquire. That is the anti-Brett Veach move in every possible way. Like, you're starting to pay him in his age 30 season. This is right around the exact time that they decided probably best to get out of the Tyreek Hill business. They decided to get out of the Tyrann Mathieu business. They got out of the business with a safety that they really liked in Justin Reed because they want to get younger at that position. I love the idea of Terry McLaurin playing for the Chiefs. I think it makes all the sense in the world. And then you think about it logistically, and I think it's the opposite of what this team would most likely do.
It's something the Raiders would do. Like it's not a
Yes.
Chiefs move.
100%. All right, Serda. Is there anything else that you want to get off your chest about what the week was in Kansas City Chiefs land as we are getting we're now 10 days away from the first Chiefs preseason game?
Next Saturday. No, I'm excited that they've got a full weekend of training camp practice, and then next week will be leading up to their first preseason action against the Cardinals. So I'm just excited to actually see them get some reps on the field and kind of see some of these guys like in a live game, and just ready for football to start. I watched the Hall of Fame game for about 5 minutes, and I was like, all right, I'm done with this.
Yeah, preseason, I just can't do it unless it's my team. Like my team, I care about the position battles. I care about the guys that are coming in the second, third quarter. By the fourth quarter, it's done with. But early on in that game, I'm legitimately intrigued by what we'll be able to see. Just a reminder for anybody, because they'll probably say this at some point prior to our show next week. Whatever Andy Reid says the starters are going to play, they'll play less than that. Starters will maybe play a drive against the Arizona Cardinals. And then against the Seattle Seahawks, they'll maybe play a quarter. And then against the Bears, they probably won't play at all. So just keep that in mind.
And after last season, I hope Hollywood Brown doesn't play a snap in the preseason.
So whatever he decides to say there, don't take that to the bank. All right. He's Stephen Serda. I'm Brandon Kiley. Ron will be back in with you guys next week. Show and BK. We are out of here.